Hello there, Annie, Bojo, Scano, Quay. It's Catherine at Moonstarlodge. I'm an Indigenous elder and lodge director, former spiritualist minister, professional medium still to this day. And I've worked with tarot since 1974 officially. So I've been around this game a long time. I have about 1,240 odd decks and about 150 reference books that I use and have collected over the years. So this has been a long journey for me. I decided today to do a VR to James Feeney at Lemniscate Logic and also to Liz at West Star Tarot. It was Liz's version of this tag which I saw, and some of the decks that she pulled in her video are the same as the ones I'm going to be showing today, simply because I think we're from the same era. But a lot of these decks do not get referenced on TarotTube anymore, and some of them are very obscure. So I thought it would be fun. These are sentimental decks for me. I don't use most of them anymore. I have long since learned and hopefully grown with my tarot practice and incorporating my psychology degree and archetypal knowledge and all of that into what I do. Being an Indigenous elder, I've always looked for the rhythms and the beauty way, as we say, with Indigenous decks. So I have a lot of leaning toward those kinds of decks as well. But there's only one of those decks in today's episode. So my table is a huge mess. It's full of bags. Some of them I hand quilted years ago to hold my decks long before tarot deck bags were a thing. So I'm just going to go willy-nilly through these decks and try to make sense. And I'm going to get Brian to flip the camera just to make it a little bit easier. So one of my earliest decks in this handmade terrible bag was my original pictorial key to the tarot. It's obviously a Rider-Waite deck. I rarely use Rider-Waite. I felt that I needed to know it to understand it. So I bought this many years ago, and I think this version of the book, while of course it's copyrighted, I think 1908, it goes back to 1992. So that's that. You don't really need to see a Rider-Waite deck, but this is a hoot. I've actually gone to software, which I use to upload and organize my decks. This was an old way of labeling bagged decks. I took a piece of muslin and I literally wrote the name and stuck it on there. Somehow this one has survived, I think just because it's a sentimental thing. This deck, the Eternal Tarot, and it's by Samael Aun Weor, and I'm sorry for not saying that correctly. You could get it with a book inside, but I also chose to buy a couple of his additional books. It's Egyptian, and it's unusual. There are 78 sequenced cards. Sorry, these are upside down. I think I did a reading and shoved these in backwards. But this is an example. Here's card 33, Alliance. This one is Preeminence. This one is Counseling. And so on. You get the idea. It's very Egyptian in scope, and sorry, these ones are upside down. I think you might still be able to get them if you contact the I'm not sure if you contact Mr. Weor is dead, but I think you can still get that. If I find the information, I will have Brian put it in the below the video in the description. But his books are very well done, and he asserts that his tarot is based on the original teachings of Moses and brought forward to a tarot deck. So that's that one. It's heavily is influenced by the Kabbalah. Another favorite deck of mine, and Liz will understand this for sure, is the Mother Piece. This is my small Mother Piece. And this is one that I had in my purse in a bag, and then I found this funky box for it. And this Mother Piece goes back to probably the latter 80s. This other version that I have in here somewhere is much larger. So you can see why I would switch. This is a bag I hand quilted myself. And here is, there goes the box. Here's the other deck. So you can see there's a significant size difference between these cards. I remember going to the Hillside Festival in Guelph, Ontario, where I'm from, and seeing at the Hillside Festival, this is back in the days in the early 80s when we all had tie-dye skirts and didn't shave our armpits and all of that stuff, and we were dancing on the side of the hill by the lake, and Vicki Noble was there, and I didn't buy my deck at that Hillside Festival. If you're Canadian, you know who Wilde is. He was singing there that day, and this just was an amazing experience. The reason I love this deck is the inclusiveness of people. Inclusiveness of body types, of race, of gender, of ability. That appealed to me. I'm in a wheelchair, so it's important to me to see inclusivity. And I noticed that a lot of decks are slammed for not being inclusive. But if you go back to this time period in the late 70s and early 80s, inclusivity was a big thing and somehow fell by the wayside. So it's an important thing. The other decks that relate to that are sentimental favorites for me, let's get rid of this, are in this same quilted bag. I have 3 versions of it. And this is the Daughters of the Moon by Fiona Morgan. There's people with non-binary gender. There's nudity. There are all cultures represented. It's feminist, it's lesbian, but again, inclusivity not just of culture and body type, but ability. And I have loved this deck so much since Fiona Morgan first put it out. I actually bought or received somehow way back when, just right after university. Here's a card that reflects inclusivity. Here's the wheelchair. Anyway, or 2 wheelchairs. This you could color, and then if you wanted to laminate, so you didn't have to stick with the colors in the deck. But I'm not a person who, as much as I am an artist and I have a studio, I'm not one to color my own images. And in those days, the idea of getting something laminated was beyond me. But this is my original pair of decks. And then a dear, dear friend purchased for me when she was on a trip to China. She found an updated version from just a few years ago. So the box is updated. The cards are not changed. They're not changed at all. They're the same size. They're nearly 6 inches. Same images, but somehow it was reissued for whatever reason. Now I understand Fiona Morgan, who was the head of a collective of women. I understand that she is deceased now. So what's interesting, these are the books that I have. That's the original Daughters of the Moon that came with my late 70s, early 80s deck. And this is the book that was just recently released. So there is a difference, not so much in the text, but there's minor revisions to my understanding. I will always keep the Mother Piece and the Daughters of the Moon. There is no question in my mind that they will remain a part of my life, my collection, and if I ever die, Brian can fan out one of them in my hands as I'm laying there in the coffin. Anyway, another blast from the past is this A Voice from the Earth by Judith Pintar. I carried this around. This is actually a cigarette case. Now, I don't smoke, but this is a cigarette case. It's leather. I found it in a dollar store run by a beautiful East Indian family, and it kept the original book. But these cards are Indigenous themed, and Judith Pintar put them out. This is the face card, the cards of winds and changes. Let me move the book. And they speak of the medicine wheel and the 7 directions. They are beautiful, simple cards visually, but if you understand our Indigenous perspectives, these cards speak volumes. I don't know if you can get it anymore. I somehow don't think so. But I've loved it so long that when my husband and I got married in 1995, I gifted him as a wedding present his own copy of this, and I'm ever so glad I did. These are just glorious cards, and as I say, they speak volumes on so many levels. Anyway, Judith Pintar, A Voice from the Earth. I love these cards, and I use them regularly in my readings on my YouTube channel, which is called Moonstarlodge. And on the channel, I do medicine wheel layouts. So whenever I'm doing a medicine wheel layout, I will pull out these cards and use them for a representation of the ancestors. Trying to move right along here. This is the Art Fair Tarot. Here's another one of these boxes. This is my old library system. You can see how old or how long I've had this. This goes back. It's a collective. There's the Fool, the Magician, the Papist, the Empress, the Emperor, the Pope, and it carries on, but not all the cards of a standard deck are in there. They do have cards representing the astrological things and little notes about it, but I think this goes back to the 70s. I should have looked that up before, because this is a microscopic little piece of paper here, but I think this is the 70s, and it's no longer available, as far as I can tell. 1970. So I've had this since 74, I believe, and it's an unusual deck. Interesting, not one that I would use with a client. It's more of a historical deck, and I use these things in my research. One of the things that's important to me is the evolution of meanings and for cards and how they have evolved and devolved over time. So this is the Art Fair Tarot, and I'm going to get talking more later about that kind of thing. Another one is the new tarot, which Liz showed on her video, so I won't get into it too far, but these little cigarette cases were just the greatest thing. So there's the same back. Mine's a little more beat up because I did use this quite a bit. And so, as Liz pointed out, it's all black and white. There's some very complex cards here that you need to really sit with and look at. Very lovely Ace of Cups. That's the face card, the new tarot deck. And yeah, that's the Empress. And so on. So again, this goes back to the very early 70s, 1974. And I know I got this the year I started reading for others. And I was just a teenager, but I was already well known in my community. So that's the new tarot. A tarot that's newer in issue is the Barbara Walker Tarot. There's the tin face. It's a mini. It's still available pretty much everywhere, I think. But Barbara Walker and I have an interesting relationship. This is the backs of the tarot. And that's the face card. But she refers to it as the House of God. She's one of the few who takes one of the original names for the tower and still uses it. Ace of Swords. Here's the Star. Two of Cups, a little bit more contemporary. Ace of Cups. Try and find something else. This is a very unusual Queen of Swords. Now, the reason I have an unusual relationship is I knew about Barbara Walker as a knitter and somebody who had a compendium and a knitting history and books of knitting patterns and knitting styles that was unlike anything I had ever experienced in the 70s and 80s. And I always have had a studio. I still do have a studio, and I make knitwear. So I knew her as a knitter before I ever experienced her in the tarot world. So the fact that she and I had this in common was huge for me. So there's the deck, and I found a book by her that goes back a long time. It was a cast-off, in fact, from the Kitchener Public Library. It's The Secrets of the Tarot, Origins, History, and Symbolism. And it says here she is the author of the Woman's Encyclopedia of Myths and Secrets. I also found a copy of that in much better nick than this, but here's the old slot where the library cards went. And I'm just looking to see what year this was printed. 1984. So this goes back. So I will never get rid of my Barbara Walker knitting books or tarot books, although I have threatened myself that I'm purging. Here's a weird one. I never see these decks reviewed, ever. So this is Paul Foster Case, and his Guide to the Tarot. And here's a black and white tarot that he was affiliated with the group that created this black and white tarot. Again, one that was created so that you could color it if you wished. Very Rider-Waite-Smith, not exactly. But this is the Builders of the Aditum. And they are a group in Los Angeles, I believe. They still exist. You can still order materials from them. And they have this little order book and membership. It's $10 monthly or $30 quarterly. So the Builders of the Aditum or Aditum, I found that the highlights book wasn't enough, so I went right to Paul Foster Case to get his other words. He was a prolific writer and involved, I believe, in the Golden Dawn. I'm sure I can, I'm open to being corrected on that. But he had quite a stellar career in the tarot and divination and alternative spiritual community. So these cards have walked with me, I would have to say since the 70s. I'm going to put the application back in here in my box because you just never know. I might someday join. I'm well into my 60s, but who knows? Let me put this over here. I'm running out of space on my tarot table. Another sentimental favorite is a new deck. It's the Naked Heart Tarot by Jillian C. Wilde. It is very similar in its construct to our indigenous decks. This is the Spirit of Pentacles. That's a bison or a buffalo. Here is the Wheel of Fortune card. It's all animals. Sorry, running out of space here to lay these out. The deck comes with a playboard, but I went ahead and purchased her tarot cloth. So here's the Magician card. Ace of Swords, the Moon, the Heart of Cups, meaning the Queen, and here's Judgment. You get the idea. I find that these resonate. I actually douse what cards, my husband douses whatever cards we're going to use with a client, and 9 clients out of 10, these come up. I resonate so much with this deck that even though it's a fairly new favorite, it is a sentimental favorite. I have 2 copies of the deck, one I don't use. And in addition to this part of her series of items, I also, in an old BlackBerry case, that dates me. This is for my BlackBerry tablet, which has gone the way of the dinosaurs. This is the Antiquities of Magic. These are the add-on cards for her Antiquities of Magic Oracle. There's the play cloth. A little difficult to see, but it gives you playing positions. And now I have to fold that back up again. But the Antiquities of Magic, it looks like a big box, and it's a fabulous book. But this is the size of the cards, and these cards have the same back. These cards are all the symbols that you will find buried in Rider-Waite-Smith decks. This is a Rider-Waite-Smith system. And although I'm not really a Rider-Waite-Smith gal, I find this goes beyond what a Lenormand can do. And so I use these to clarify my readings when I have her decks out. So you can laugh at my storage. I find I'm very resourceful. I come from an age and time where you had to be. A deck that I've received very, very recently, but is sentimental because my dad was a veteran of World War II. This is Kobe's Tarot. He was a prisoner in one of the concentration camps, and he detailed in his deck some of the atrocities and strangeness of life in a concentration camp. He was an artist and suffered terribly at the hands of the Nazi imprisoners. So I managed to find this on a site called Two for His Heels. And the fellow that runs it is a card aficionado. It's only playing cards on his deck site. All kinds and types, regular playing cards, but vintage tarot. I don't often buy because it's you know, getting information or getting shipping to the States and back, and the, you know, Canadian to American dollar. But this always will hold a place in my heart, because I know my father, as an Allied soldier and an Indigenous man, gave up a lot. He gave up a lot of his body. This man gave up a lot of his body. They both gave up a lot of their soul. So, and both were prisoners differently. Anyway, that's an important deck to me. And I'm going to do a couple of honorable mentions here of sentimental value. Well, this isn't an honorable mention. This is Jamie Sam's and David Carson's Madison cards deck. And this is the Sacred Path card. And they are worked together. Jamie Sam's and I have a similar Indigenous background. I made this bag for it too, to be able to carry them around safely, padded velvet. So these are worked together, and these talk about our ceremonies. And I like to get Indigenous decks by actual Indigenous people, and I'm working on a couple of my own, one an oracle and one a tarot. But these are the rituals, and these are authentic. There are a few decks put out by companies like Los Scarabeo, where the authors are not Indigenous, and it seems like cultural appropriation. Well, it is cultural appropriation to me. So I love these cards. These are the ceremonies, and I'm sure everybody knows these cards by now. These are the totems, the animal spirits that walk with us. That's a card you can add your own to. There's dolphin, mountain lion, bear. And these represent animals from all over Turtle Island, what we call North America. I have all the workbooks, all the hardcover, original hardcover books, because these go back into the late 70s and early 80s. And I have original cards, and these are original decks. I managed to keep this box intact. This box actually fell apart. I used it so much. So these are decks you'll see when I do my new moon and full moon videos. I didn't bring the books out. There's too many of them. This beauty, James Feeney will recognize. It's my original Toth Greenie. Anna from Astral Lady Tarot will recognize the greenie. I've had this deck since before university. It's my favorite Thoth deck. I found it intimidating in the beginning. I had to really read. This is what I did to the box. I was having some issues with storage, so I actually cut the front piece off the box and the back piece off the box, and it came with a little book. But needless to say, over the years, in order to understand Crowley, I got most of his books now. I just recently picked up a copy of 777, and I hand quilted this bag with ducks on it many, many, many years ago, and I gave my husband one as well. Moving along. Yes, I am moving along. What is this one? I'll get to that in a minute. I'm trying to do my oldest decks first, and I've already goofed up. Here's my Tarot of a Moon Garden. I have 2 copies of this. This is the one where the box was so worn out it had to be ditched. This is a very underrated deck, and I've seen a few people, including Anna, talk about it. These are gorgeous cards. They were gorgeous and emblematic of how I think and how I experience nature and spirits. So this is an amazing deck. A lot of the fae in there, but it's definitely about being in the Moon Garden. Now this came with its own little white book, which I have here. Here's my little white book. But that wasn't enough for me. I had to have the actual book that went with it, and I quite like it. It has more information, obviously, and it was worth searching down. This is US Games version. So I have 2 copies, one that I won't use at all and one that I do use. Now here's a rare deck. This is the Zoltan Tarot, and I put it in a leather pouch because I work with leather. This was one of 250 decks, and it was by Peter Balin in 1976, and I happened to get one of the originals. So the Zoltan Tarot is based on the codices of glyphs. If you think of cartouches in an Egyptian temple, these glyphs are from Mayan temples, and a lot of the codices were destroyed. But these are very, very old cards, and I won't use them simply because I don't want to destroy them. Where I go for the information that I want is to the original book, Flight of the Feathered Serpent, again by Peter Balin. And these are very treasured and kept tucked away. It's hard to read them without a fair bit of study. But there's a 3 of Cups, so you've got staffs, you've got some of the similar, like this is Jades, which is instead of Pentacles. And there's swords. So you've got your suits, and it is a tarot. It's not that it's not a tarot, but it's very difficult to read it based on the symbols in the card, because they really are culturally not anything like what we use today. So it's not Rider-Waite-Smith, and it's not like Marseille, and it's certainly not like Thoth. All right, we're getting there. This deck is by Yves Renaud. It's a tarot Pierre Madine 1709. It's in what I call a butter box. It came wrapped, I ordered this from Dijon, France. It came wrapped in this beautiful, beautiful hand-printed paper. The corners are not rounded, but he did an exquisite job of fixing up the cards of Pierre Madine. And I learned about this deck from Anna at Astral Lady Tarot, and I contacted Eve and he had one, and I love it, and I won't use it because it's square cornered. I won't aberrate it because I don't modify decks. I leave them as the author intended them. So it's one that I take out for study purposes. Again, because I cross-reference things all the time. So that's Pierre Madine. And I guess the last deck that I wanted to look at is a contemporary new deck. And most everybody has seen it, the Antique Anatomy deck by Claire Goodchild in Toronto, very close to me actually. I've managed to, let's lay a few of them out in case you're not familiar. Cardstock is a little thin on this one, but I do use them. I don't find I've had any problem with them. So you've got the standard tarot, but I also managed to score a couple of add-ons and a third one that's coming. So this one is her Oracle, which I believe is still available on her site. And it has all the cards of a Lenormand in it, plus another 50-odd cards. And then this update add-on, this is the Ancestors Advisory Pack, the General Expansion Pack, and then the one that's coming, I believe, in August. You can go to her site and order it if you are interested in these decks. But these are the ones that are coming have astrological and time issues related to them. I think that's everything. You can flip the camera, Brian. So you can see that I'm pretty old there in a lot of these decks. I've treasured and cherished over 5 decades. I have books that go back to the early 1900s and earlier than that are reference materials. It's been important to me to see the ongoing legacy of the original masters of tarot, that we honor their intentions and the knowledge that they brought forward in the decks they created. Now, some of the decks I've shown you are, kind of screwy tangents. But those are the dreamers and the thinkers and the people who are not afraid to say, what if the background information came from the base of the Sphinx, like Edgar Cayce said. One of my cherished decks that I didn't bring out is a Minciotti. I have a few Minciottis, and I know that there are supposed to be 108 cards, and some of them are lost. I know that the numerological stuff is really, really important in tarot. And I had some issue when I first was studying that Ralph Waite deviated, particularly in the Suit of Swords. Benabel Wen has been a great resource to me in comparing and contrasting Toth, Rider-Waite-Smith, her own deck, the Spirit Keeper's Tarot, and Marseille. So I would suggest to anybody that's interested in the history. But I think, the history needs to come forward. So I call myself a curator. I don't call myself a collector because I'm very careful about the decks I bring in. Now, Brian, if I would let him on camera here, would say, yeah, but what about the Gummy Bears Tarot? How do you curate that? Well, that was just, a goof. I think I had a glass of wine that night, but, whatever. We all have those decks that we bring in and go, what the hell did I do that for? But the vast majority, like 98% of my decks, are decks that I respect the authorship of. I admire the depths of the research. And so my sentimental favorites are my babies in that sense. As I move in this decade of my life, I look forward to stepping back a little bit. I mean, I have an active practice and still have an active YouTube channel. I put out twice a week on Instagram. I do readings, and I do a weekly YouTube reading, and then additional readings, or not readings, but videos, like this one today. So anyway, thank you for watching me bumble through my cards, and having a chance to dust them off is wonderful. So miigwech, niawen, be blessed, aho.